Hey guys, it's Vince. Today I'm going to do a video discussing a question I get asked at least 3 to 6 times a week, and that is, which Gecko driver best meets my application? Well, of course, I always usually answer that question with, what's your budget? Because we all know 98% of the time your budget's going to dictate which driver system you go with. Again, you're picking a Gecko drive, so there's really no answer that's going to be wrong. It really is based upon, what kind of outlook you're looking at as far as your pocket. So once we get past that, though, I'm going to elaborate real quick on what we're looking at before you. You've got a Gecko G540 integrated 4-axis subsystem, and then you have a Gecko G201X Pro Grade Series driver. The main difference you can see between the two, again, the G540 has 4-axis built into its aluminum enclosure. It also has a DB25 breakout board. Each DB9 female connector you see before you is allocated to an individual stepper driver. Inside this enclosure is Gecko G251 drivers. Okay, it actually houses 4 of them. This system is just a driver. You will require a breakout board, and you will require more of these depending upon how many axes you want to run. You will require 1 for each axis independently you plan on running. So if you plan on running a 3-axis system, you're required to own 3 of these. 4-axis, you'll need 4, 5-axis, and so forth, you'll need 5 and 6, and so forth. So keep that in mind, okay? The next thing to keep in mind is price, okay? And just to give you a breakdown on price, G540 around $300, and again, that's for 4-axis. This unit starts at about $130, and again, this is Gecko's base Pro line driver system. Now it's a slightly older driver system. Guys, I'm going to clue you in on something real quick. Gecko's latest and greatest model is the G214. It's an amazing driver, just as much as this unit is. Are you going to see a huge difference? You are not. I'm telling you, in real world performance, you might see a slight difference. Is it worth the extra money? That's totally up to your budget. If all you can afford and you want to go pro grade is a G201X, I assure you, you will not be disappointed. These drivers still put out an amazing amount of speed and still have an amazing amount of torque available, because again, the main difference between this driver, which is the pro grade, and the G540, which they consider more of their hobby grade, which I've never really accurately thought that was the case, but the main difference is that this driver system and all their pro grade driver systems support up to a 7-amp stepper motor. Okay, so why do we look at this as pro grade? Well, a 7-amp stepper motor is massive. I mean, typically up to 7 amps is a lot of torque available. Amps equal torque, and realistically, the higher the amount of amps, the more amount of torque you'll have available. On top of that, and this is the biggest difference between these two drives, in my personal opinion, is the fact that the G540 can only do 50 volts as maximum input, and the G201 and all their pro grade drivers can go up to 80 volts. Now guys, volts on input equals speed on your rapids, okay? Not so much when you're machining, because let's all think about that for a minute. Just because you have the speed available doesn't mean you're going to turn it up when you're machining. It'll be there, but to keep accuracy and keep everything true, typically you're not going to machine at a ridiculous pace, although it will be there, okay? Overall, what you're going to see is that on larger type systems, if you're going with a larger type chassis, we'll say an 8x10 router, you would be looking at a pro grade driver optimally, mainly because that chassis is so big that you'll want to cover that table as quickly as possible to get jobs done. Now, does that mean that the G540 cannot run that chassis? It does not. And I repeat that, it does not. If that fits your budget, then go with a G540. You're going to be running 48 volts. Again, that's no slouch in itself, but it's certainly not going to cover the distance that a pro grade driver will at 72 volts. Now, why I say 72 volts instead of 80 is because I like to leave a slight variance so that we're not looking at maxing these drives out for their temperature rating. And why I say that, guys, and I just want to cover this in detail, you can see the aluminum mounting plate that comes actually installed on these drives is very, very thin. Okay, and that being said, these are pro grade drives, which means they must, and I repeat, must be heat sunk. If they are not, you will risk damaging these drives. Okay, Gecko states that clearly in the instruction manual available on their website. The other thing I wanted to cover, because a lot of guys always ask questions, what are all these dip switches for? The dip switches you see here is really a great design. It lets you set the dip switches in coordination with your amp rating on your stepper motor. So you can actually set each driver based on your individual steppers. So if you think about that, where the G540 is integrated and does not allow that use, the way you would actually set your drivers individually for the stepper motors, you would actually adjust the resistor that actually controls the amps going to the stepper, whereas this unit, on each actual motor, you would just adjust the actual these dip switches. Once the dip switches are adjusted and coordinated to the stepper, you get the performance you should. On top of that, these drivers also have, just like the G540, an adjustment to fine-tune the low speed resonance of your stepper motor for as minimal vibration as possible. Once again, they are not cheap drives, even though they are the base model pro grade systems. They are amazing performers, and again, you can see how Gecko did the right thing by labeling everything easy for easy identification and hookup, on top of the terminal block being able to snap on and off, so you could just literally wire them in, pop them off, and then pop them back on when you're all done and wired in. Very, very easy design, very simple, and again, very small. You can see how big it is near the actual G540. The interesting thing is the amount of heat that is produced with these when you are running 72 volts. Now guys, I'm going to tell you the truth. The G540, I've built over 100 enclosures with this drive. Okay, I'm not exaggerating. You can check my eBay store if you have any questions on that. What's interesting is these drivers, when they're hooked up in an enclosure, with the ambient temperature of the power supply that's in that enclosure, will easily get to 200 degrees. These pro grade drivers, just think math here, guys. If this is 50 volts on the G540 and getting that hot, these running at 72 volts will fry, and I mean literally fry. These will get extremely hot if they are not properly heat sunk. So the next question is, what's a proper heat sink? To give you an idea, Gecko on their website sells one for $74. And to be honest with you, that's about accurate, because the heatsink I recommend with these units should be at least 3 pounds. And if I'm talking a unit for 3 drives. So if you have one of these, of course, it'd be much smaller. However, a minimal 3-axis system, you're going to want a 3 or 4 pound heatsink. And again, the length of it should be actually adequate to provide accurate room for these, because again, they're not super big, but the bigger it is, the more surface area it has, the harder it is for these drives to overheat, which we have to think about, because you want to protect your investment and you want to have stability. So again, keep that in mind when going through. You can already see how the money adds up so fast when you build a pro grade driver system, because again, it's not integrated. That's why the G540 is an amazing platform. The next thing I want to cover is that a lot of guys used to believe, and a lot of the myths that you read online, and typically in these forums, I find it funny. Again, I'm not a big forum freak, because I realize that you never know who you're getting information from on a forum. Okay, you don't know the background of the person that's telling you stuff. You just are hoping you're getting accurate information. Well, I'm going to tell you, I learned a lot of this through trial and error the hard way, and most of it is actual demonstrations and testing different theories. And I can tell you truthfully, you can learn from that if you're willing to listen, because one of the most interesting theories that you'll read online is that the G540 cannot support a large knee-type mill. Well, I'm going to tell you what I just did. I just did a retrofit on a Bridgeport, full-scale knee mill Bridgeport, and we utilized NEMA 42 motors so that he would not have to change mounts and go through different stepper sizes. Needless to say, the client that I went with, we did a prototype on it, NEMA 42s, and the mill works flawlessly. Why is that? Because we know that at 48 volts, the stepper is still going to get 48 volts, no different than if we decided to run at 48 volts with a Pro drive. But what we did was we calculated correctly the accurate amount of torque available. Even if this drive can't put out 7 amps, it still can put out the 3.5 amp max. Again, it's rated at max, which again, we're going to look at the stepper motor max. If the stepper motor max is 5 amps, and again, I did this in the previous video on explaining this drive for the math, it's very simple. As long as the torque is available and produced by the drive, regardless of how many amps are put out, you can utilize that stepper motor. Okay, pending, of course, your inductance is not through the roof, which most of them are not. If they're made for CNC automation, you'll be pretty much set to go. And to give you an idea, the client that I built it for is actually using that full-scale Bridgeport to machine car superchargers. So amazing business, amazing opportunity, and amazing savings. I mean, if you see the price on the $300 drive versus these systems, and I'm going to tell you guys, I got messaged the other day about building a system with pro-grade drivers. Pro-grade driver system with a 72 volt power supply. Again, I always go with a 16.5 amp unit. I just engineered a new 72 volt 16.5 amp modular unit. I will be releasing a video on that soon. Is going to run you about $3,000 when things are all said and done, if it's done correctly. And why is that? Well, we have to machine the enclosure, we have to buy all the integrated parts, we then have to wire it, test everything. I mean, there's a lot of work involved. The G540 is, once again, probably one of the best contenders, even against its own pro-grade performers, mainly because of that. You know, so keep that in mind. If you're looking for simplicity, of course, there's no matching the G540. But if we're looking at the endurance capacity, again, if you're going to use high amp motors, if you have to use a high amp motor, then so be it. However, I can tell you right now, I've just released a new NEMA 34. It will be coming out mid-October. I did a prototype. I will have my new motors in stock by probably mid-October. I would say the 15th or so. And they will support up to 1,300 ounce. And that is with 3.5 amps. So I can tell you guys right now, the Gecko now will be able to fully support larger mills and with ease. So that will save you guys a lot of money. However, if you do want to step up to a Gecko Pro Driver, which of course it does have its applications where, again, if you're dealing with a larger table and you're dealing with larger machining operations and faster operations, this is going to help you tremendously in the sense that, again, you have a 40% speed increase on your rapid motion. Now, again, and I stated this already, larger tables will require a faster speed typically to cover a larger distance. So if you have that 8x10 router, you're definitely going to want to be looking at the G201X optimally. Again, budget pending, you could still start with the G540 and still get adequate performance. Okay, is it going to be as fast? Absolutely not. You're looking at a 40% difference in speed. That being said, if you're looking at a CNC 6040 from China Mill and you're doing a retrofit on it, the Gecko G540 is going to provide you way more speed than you probably even want, to be quite honest with you, because again, the chassis is much smaller. You would never want to go with a pro-grade driver other than just basically wasting money or sitting it on the shelf in the capacity that you'd use it on another system. So think about it like that. Don't waste your money. Think smart and think, you know, what am I going to get out of my system? A lot of times on forums and stuff like that, guys are reading, and typically it's more like bragging. Oh, look, I can go this fast. Hey, my rapids are this fast. I look at what I can produce, because if I can produce what you can produce and I save the money doing it my way, then I'm making more money. That's business, guys. That's the way it should be thought about. Eventually, and again, I hear hobbyists all the time, hey, I'm starting it as a hobby, but we all know what that means. It's a hobby until they get sufficient enough to where it becomes a business, and then they start realizing, you know what, if I can make that part cheaper, I'm way ahead of the game. So again, that's what I look at. I don't make a difference, you know, me doing these videos, I'm not making any more money selling either of these drives. I'm letting you know that if you can save money by going with this over this, then do it. If by the same token you feel that it's more adequate to go with a pro-grade driver for your individual needs, then you should absolutely do that. And I cannot emphasize that enough, because again, the speed and performance of these drives are amazing when paired correctly with the right components. Again, you're going to have the accuracy. Both drives have the same accuracy. So you're not going to see, and how do I know that? If you go on Gecko's site, guys, and I can't emphasize this enough, both drivers have the same micro stepping. So realistically, the big difference here is the voltage availability and the amps that are adjustable to support larger steppers. That's what makes a pro-grade driver a pro-grade driver. That's it. So again, and again, your budget. I should say that too, because again, we all know you go this route, you're looking thousands, and I mean thousands, just to get the controller up and running. If you're doing it by yourself and you want to do the wiring and that, be prepared to do extensive wiring. I mean, I cannot emphasize that enough. The Gecko is by far, the G540 is by far faster to set up than a pro-grade driver system. But you reap the rewards for what you're willing to invest. So think about it in that perspective and you'll be good. Overall, I hope this video has covered the basics to help you guys make an educated choice. And when you do have doubt, don't be afraid to ask. I hope this video has covered everything, but I know that there are still a lot of questions out there floating. But the main thing to consider is this, and I can't emphasize this enough: the G540 is still very capable of powering about 90, I would say about 85% of the systems out there, depending upon what your application is. If you have, if you're expecting ridiculous type performance, be realistic, and when I say ridiculous type performance, if you're getting crazy with rapids and you're looking at, an 8x10 table and you're looking at numbers and this and that, be realistic in the sense that you're still using 48 volts, whereas 72 volts on a table that size is optimal. That's going to give you the performance you want to cross that table as quickly as possible. But again, we all need a starting point. If you're just starting a business, don't be afraid to go with a G540, because I'll tell you right now, on a table like that, you're still going to have the accuracy to machine and profit, and then when you get strong enough, you can jump right up to a pro-grade system. Offset that price by selling your new G540 system. If you keep it in the proper shape it should be, you'll still make back some money and recoup some of that initial investment. So hopefully this video has been informative. I try to make them as informative as possible, and again, I know I'm sure I miss things because I'm trying to cover things quickly, but again, if you guys have any questions, don't be afraid to ask. The big thing here is to remember the Gecko, both of these are extremely great performers. Whichever one you pick, you're not going to lose either way. The big thing is that with the G540, your pocket will be fuller longer. With the G201X and the other Gecko Pro Grade drives, you'll be putting in a couple $1,000s before the day is done. So once again, budget first, move on to performance, and stay realistic with your goals, and you'll be set. And hopefully, within a short amount of time, as you're starting as a hobby, if that's what you're doing, you'll profit with business very shortly as you become more familiar with the equipment. So again, I hope this has been informative. My name is Vince. If you have any questions, you can message me either through YouTube or eBay, and I'll be continuing with some more videos. Like I said, I do have a 72-volt new modular power supply for these bad boys and all of Gecko Pro Grade driver systems, which is a toolless design, and I will be releasing my new NEMA 34s. I also have NEMA 34s that I'm releasing for the Pro Grade drives rated at 5 amps that'll put out 1,700 ounce. So again, keep eyes available, because if you want to build a crazy system in the sense that we need more torque, we can come up with whatever we need to get the job done. I promise you that. Once again, I thank you guys for tuning in. Take care.